afternoon. Distinguished elders, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is a truly splendid meeting. This is the biggest meeting I think I have ever addressed in Newcastle. Something is happening here. Something big is happening here. And you will always know that you were there at the start. And that will last a long time in your memory. There's something about tonight which is the band coming back together. Not only was the first speaker my election agent when I won the historic Bradford West by-election, but one of my opponents in that by-election, Dawood Islam, is sitting in the front row. And we're all fighting for Yvonne Ridley, who was a visiting speaker for me in that historic by-election. So we're all together here again, many years later, for this great cause. And I feel something of the Bradford West spirit in this room this evening. We have traveled many miles together. I think there are more than have been mentioned that are in the room that were on the convoys over and over again breaking the siege on Gaza. In fact, Yvonne was the first person to break the siege on Gaza. By sea, if I recall. By sea, she embarked upon a far more perilous journey than even our land convoys into Gaza. But they were perilous, all of them. And they were very long ago, which I dwell on because there are still some fools who believe that all of this started on October the 7th last year. If that was true, how come these old people here have been breaking the siege on Gaza year after year after year for decades? The Palestinian people didn't just begin starving on October the 8th, although this is the ugliest, most obscene chapter of a whole chamber of horrors that the Palestinian people have been subjected to. It didn't begin 6 months ago. They were starving when we broke the siege to bring them food. Otherwise, why did we do it? They were without medical help more than a decade ago. Otherwise, why did we bring them medicine? They lacked ambulances. Otherwise, why did we drive ambulances to them 14, 15 years ago? But I'll come back to that. I want to deal with some British issues first. Ash quoted Henry Ford. A wonderful quote. I hadn't heard it before. I usually use the Einstein one. But the Henry Ford one is actually, if the great professor will forgive me, even better. If you could keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. But Henry Ford said something else of note in his long life as an exploiter in the United States. He said of his Ford Model T motor car, the first mass motor car in history, you can have it in any color you like as long as it's black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, isn't that the politics that we have in Britain now? You can vote for one cheek or the other cheek, of the same backside, as long as they all stand for the same SH1T. Isn't that the truth of it? You can vote Labour and have privatised water owned by a Hong Kong tycoon, or you can vote Tory and have privatised water. I mean, who knew? That again I've learned tonight. A Hong Kong tycoon owns Newcastle's water. Do you remember, those of you old enough, when they started this privatisation lark? It was just tell Sid. Just tell Sid we were all going to become little capitalists, buying shares in our own privatised industries that we all owned anyway as public utilities. Who knew that the day would come when it wouldn't be Sid that owned the privatised utility? It would be a Chinaman in Hong Kong paying out vast sums in dividends to presumably Hong Kong shareholders, whilst your water bill goes up and up. Water companies pollute more and more, and who knows, the same will be true of all of those privatised utilities. I know that the trains are owned largely by even foreign countries. We have the absurdity where some of our train lines are owned by nationalised train companies in foreign countries. How's that for privatisation? So you can vote Labour or Tory as long as you accept that all you're going to get is privatisation. You can have a health service. Tony Blair's very honest. He's a very honest man, Blair. In one manner of speaking. In one way, he is. He openly said this week there should be a basic health service for the likes of you. Whereas the good health service, the better health service, should be for the likes of him. And he shouldn't have to pay tax to provide a basic health service for the likes of you. So you'll get, just like we had in the 1930s, a basic health service for you. In the 1930s, before 9/11, healthcare was provided by charities, if you were lucky. But I'll tell you what, even in those days, if you went to an A&E, you wouldn't be lying on a trolley for 15 or 16 hours before anyone could see you. You wouldn't be waiting on a waiting list for years for essential treatment. But that's what we've got now in a national health service, starved of funds, top heavy with managers and administrators and blood-sucking private companies, ripping off the taxpayer, ripping off the patients, ripping off the workers in the health service for their own private profits. And guess what? In the next election, you can vote for that, or you can vote for that again by voting for the other party. Both parties are committed to exactly the same path of privatization and a second-class health service for working people. That's what they call democracy in this country. You can have any color you like as long as it's black. And I've just seen it in action. It's a small matter, maybe, for some. But I sat in the House of Commons this week. I had a busy week. 3 times I spoke in the Parliament this week. But the time I didn't get called was on the smoking bill that went through the other day. You don't have to agree with me that it's invidious and tyrannical what they did, but the point is, both parties, big blocks of them, the whole House, hearing at the same time, agreeing with each other in total. The bill will, I don't know if any of you are shopkeepers here, fair chance that some of you might be. You're going to have to decide 7 years from now whether somebody's 34 or 35. If they're 35, you can sell them cigarettes. If they're 34, you'll be fined if you sold them cigarettes. They won't be fined, you will be fined because you sold cigarettes to a 34-year-old. That's going to be tricky in 50 years when you have to decide between a 75-year-old and a 74-year-old who's not allowed to buy cigarettes. That's the kind of madness that they did this week. But the point is that they did it together. Labour and the Conservatives are absolutely one party, a uni-party. That's what they call democracy in this country. The next day, much more seriously, they were together again. The whole House was packed to hear little Rishi Sunak denounce, it's one of my phrases that has stuck. He'll always be little Rishi Sunak to me. Sunak came to the dispatch box to denounce the Iranian attack which killed nobody on Israel last weekend. And Keir Starmer got up and in almost identical language denounced the same attack. Neither of them, it's unbelievable this, neither of them even mentioned that the Iranian attack last weekend was the direct result of an Israeli attack on an Iranian embassy, as if it never happened. I was the only person to raise the obvious fact, talk about an elephant sitting in a room that nobody mentions, that this all happened because the Iranian embassy in Damascus was destroyed by an Israeli attack. Well, they looked at me as if I was something the cat had dragged in. You see, they don't want people inside the bubble telling the obvious truth that they want to conceal. And they think or thought that inside that bubble they could talk their fake narratives and nobody would bust that bubble. And I'm there now to bust that bubble. And I want Yvonne Ridley sitting next to me in Parliament, busting those bubbles. Ash called her a local lass. I want to tell you how local she is, though she might be embarrassed. We were in a hotel in Baghdad before the war, trying to stop the sanctions, trying to stop the war, and there was a fire alarm, and everybody had to come down in their night clothes. What were her night clothes? Tracksuit bottoms and a Newcastle United shirt 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago. Nearly 25 years ago, long before she was running for office here in Newcastle. That was her nightgown. A black and white Newcastle United top. Newcastle would be lucky to have Yvonne Ridley as their Member of Parliament. Rather than, who is this person? I mean, I can't say the name, so I'm not going to try. Who is this person that you're all talking about? Sheen. Well, look, I've honestly never heard of her. I've never seen her. She's never impacted on British politics at all. In all of my lifetime, I've never heard of her. She's a person of no consequence. Otherwise, I would have heard of her if she was a person of any consequence. She's a placeholder, that's all. She's a placeholder, picking up the money, filling her boots with a big salary and big expenses and doing what she's told. That's all she is there for. And now I must turn to the subject of the... Are you worried about time?
No.
Now I must turn to the main subject of this evening. I learned many things tonight. Yvonne's quotation from the traitor Ramsay MacDonald was quite startling. I'd never heard that before either, though you will hear me say it from now on. I'll try to attribute it to you. Labour and Zionism are twins. Sure, it was Balfour, the Conservative, that signed the declaration on behalf of one people, promising a second people the land that belonged to a third people. How's that for imperial folly? Britain didn't even possess Palestine at the time that it gave it away, but they did so with Labour support. And in fact, the Labour government of Ramsay MacDonald, just as the Attlee government of 1945, Clement Attlee, just as all of the Labour governments over the decades, all of them have been full-hearted supporters of Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. That much is a matter of recorded history. Nobody could dispute it. But it went into overdrive when Tony Blair became the leader of the Labour Party. Then it became an article of faith that you must join the Labour Friends of Israel. Imagine. People who claim to be socialists signing up in their droves to an organization in support of an apartheid state, ethnic cleansing, periodic massacre, decade after decade, guilty of the gravest crimes against humanity. But you don't get on in the British Labour Party unless you sign up as a friend of that. I call them the Labour Fiends of Israel. And I always claim, oh, it's a misprint, I just missed the R. Out. Labour Fiends of Israel, that's what they are. Because you would have to be a fiend to support what's happening right now, this minute, in Gaza, in Jerusalem, and in the West Bank, and in Lebanon, actually, where they're also killing Palestinians. The crimes, again, as Yvonne put it, are the most documented, but most denied genocide in history. But herein lies Labour's problem. I came here today from Rochdale. I attended 2 Jummah prayers in different parts of the constituency. Everybody there knows everything that is happening on a daily basis in Palestine. Thanks to our mobile phones, thanks to our social media, even though the television refuses to report it, even though the papers report it and distort it, everybody knows. And that's Labour's problem. That's why they are in such terror about the forthcoming elections, local and national, because they know that we know what they did, what they said, the green light that they gave, the cover that they gave, for crimes so grave, they begin to compare with the crimes of the fascist Holocaust of the 1930s and 40s. This very day is the anniversary of the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, when the Jews trapped in the ghetto in Warsaw, surrounded by fascists on the other side of the fence, fearing that they would all die singly of typhus, of hunger, of lack of water, of sickness and disease, decided that it was more dignified to rise up and die on their feet than to die singly on their knees. These brave Jews rose up and sought to overthrow the fascist guards around their ghetto, and we rightly, this night in a mosque, salute their memory as brave heroes who decided to die with dignity, and they died in their thousands. What's the difference between the Warsaw Ghetto and Gaza? There is no difference at all between them. What's the difference between the Israeli fascist guards surrounding the world's biggest open-air prison and the beasts of Hitler surrounding the ghetto in Warsaw? Tell me, anyone tell me, what's the difference between these two things? And therefore, what's the difference between the brave Jews who rose up against their jailers and the Palestinian resistance who rise up against their jailers? Tell me what the difference is. Why is one a hero and the other a villain? Why is one a hero and the other a terrorist? The terrorists are the jailers who have kept the millions of Palestinians, generation after generation. Yvonne, think of this, the children that we saw and gave little teddy bears to all those years ago. Their children are now being killed. God. 2 days ago, 11 children were murdered in a school playground by a rocket fired by a drone made in Britain, with Labour and Tory support, made in Britain and sold to Israel. It fired the rocket. It killed 11 children. My daughter here, there in the corner, children her age were murdered. I can't look at her without thinking of them. I can't look at them without thinking of her. Aren't you the same? Yeah. These children look like our children. They could be our children. But for the grace of God, they are not our children.
They are our children.
They are our children. They are our children. They are our children. Most of you know about the 11 kids 2 days ago. Hardly anybody knows what happened the next day. 4,000 embryos
God, don't tell me.
were murdered in the Gaza Strip's only fertility clinic. 4,000 in one bomb were destroyed. Every one of those was a viable child. Somebody's precious child that they may have waited years and tried so often to conceive. 4,000 children wiped out by one bomb in one strike. Where's all the pro-lifers? Where's all the anti-abortion campaigners? Where are all those people that tell us life begins at conception? 4,000 babies killed in one instant. These crimes are almost beyond compare. But the difference is, when the Nazis were murdering the Jews in the Holocaust, our country fought against it. Our men went to war against it. We blockaded Nazi Germany. We made alliances with the United States, with Soviet Russia, to defeat it, and defeat it we did. In this Holocaust, we are on the side of the genociders. We protect them in the United Nations. We sell them weapons. We denounce the people who protest against it as hate marchers and all the other things that they have called you and called me. That's a big difference, you know. To go from being the country that stood against genocide to being the country facilitating, enabling genocide, shows how far we are reduced as a country, as a people, as a society. To go from having a media that highlighted the horrors of the concentration camps to having a media that glorifies the people who hold the Palestinian people in incarceration in the worst possible circumstances, is a measure of how far we have come. At the United Nations yesterday, a motion to admit the state of Palestine into the UN was vetoed by the United States. Yes, but Britain abstained, just like this, whatever her name is, abstained on the ceasefire motion in Parliament. Abstained on the solution. If it is a solution of a crime that has lasted for so long now, inevitably, because of prayers, I must close. But I don't want to close without referring to an epic election that will take place before Yvonne Ridley's epic election. It's in the Wingrove ward, where the chairman of this mosque is standing as an independent candidate, Yunus Muhammad. It is vital. It is vital, Yunus. It is vital that he wins, because if he wins, it will be the springboard for her winning in the general election in Newcastle, Central and West. Brother Yunus, I've nicked all your time.
You nicked all my speech as well.
Please welcome the next councillor for the Wingrove ward, Yunus Muhammad.